All right, today we are going to focus on energy in ecosystems. Where does all the energy go when you eat the hamburger you had for dinner last night or the lettuce that you took from the garden? Remember, we are going to be taking Cornell notes, so follow along and fill in the blanks. So ecosystems, where do they fit in our ecological organization? We start with individuals. Individuals combine and make populations. When we combine different species of individuals, we then have a community. And then ecosystem is the different species together plus those non-living components such as water, rocks, soil, the sun. Okay, before we start, what exactly is energy? Energy is going to be the ability to do work. So when we have energy, there are two laws that underlie energy being transferred. So the first law of thermodynamics is that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So energy doesn't just appear from nowhere and it doesn't just disappear. The second law of thermodynamics states that energy can be transformed into different types of energy. So that means that energy can be transformed to chemical energy inside our bodies. It can be transformed to heat energy and released as sweat or panting in other organisms. Energy moves through the ecosystems. It cannot be recycled. How does energy flow through the ecosystems? It starts with the sun. The sun is our source of energy. The sun then gives its energy to those producers. Producers were the things such as plants that can make their own food. And then consumers eat the producers. We have first, second, and third order consumers. First order consumers are also called primary heterotrophs. Those are herbivores. Secondary consumers are also called secondary heterotrophs, and those are known as carnivores. And third order consumers can also be called tertiary consumers, which are our omnivores. And like I said before, energy can be transformed, so some of the energy when we eat is lost as heat. Organisms can get their energy through different ways. They can be a producer, they can be a consumer, or they can be a decomposer. Producers perform the process of photosynthesis, consumers eat other organisms, and decomposers break down dead, decaying matter. So producers produce their own food, like I said, through the process of photosynthesis, which requires the sun's energy. Another name for a producer is an autotroph, which translates to self-feeder. So these organisms can make their own food. These are things such as plants. There are some bacteria that can perform photosynthesis and some protists. Protists are little tiny microscopic organisms mostly found in the water. Consumers are organisms that have to eat or consume other organisms to get their energy. We call these heterotrophs or other feeders. So this would be animals, whether it's an herbivore, a carnivore, an omnivore, if it's the top predator or a scavenger that goes along and eats on dead organisms. And the last, decomposers. These are organisms that break down dead, decaying organic matter and transform that into energy. These are also sometimes referred to as saprotrophs in other textbooks. This is your mushroom, your fungus, some bacteria as well. Okay, looking at each of those organisms together, they can be placed into food chains and food webs. A food chain is chain is a simple way of showing transfer of energy from the sun. We start with the sun gives its energy to a producer, the producer gives its energy to a primary consumer, and then so on. Notice that the arrows are showing the flow of energy, not who eats who. The sun is not able to eat the tree. So if we're looking at the same food chain, we can identify different trophic levels or feeding levels. So the sun is not its own trophic level. We start our trophic levels with the producer. So if we start, we have plants in trophic level 1 or energy level 1. Our primary consumer is in trophic level 2. Our secondary consumer is trophic level 3. And our third order consumer is trophic level 4. So, take the time, we're going to identify the different trophic levels. Another way of showing the transfer of energy is an energy pyramid. We've been working with these the last week. An energy pyramid shows how much energy is available at each level, each trophic level. So if you look at the bottom, we have our primary producers, and then first order, second order, third, fourth, and then your top predator. So the sun's energy provided the necessary energy for these producers to make their own food. Remember, only 10% of the available energy is passed on to each level. So as we move up the energy pyramid, our amount of energy decreases. So again, here's just another way of depicting. We start with 1,000 units in our producers. The grasshopper eats the producer, so it gets 10% of the energy, and so on as we move up the food chain. A food web is food chains that are connected together. It shows different feeding relationships in an entire community. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to identify producers, consumers, and so forth for each level. All right, any questions? Now is the time to ask.